2021 is a good year to be a tank fan because this year the game Sprocket was released, and it's a really cool little tank design game. But it's very complex, and a lot of people are kind of wondering how the general stuff works. So today I'll be showing around a little bit of basics of the editor and how basically everything works. So the entirety of the game is built around three values. We got the internal space for the hull, internal space for the turret, and for weight. And basically the entire design is going to be dictated by that. So for example, if I make the width of the tank smaller, you're going to notice I'm drastically lowering my internal space for my hull while not really touching that of my turret. Similarly, if I go to the turret and change the diameter of the turret ring, I will get an increased size of turret space while reducing the size of the hull space. So there's a lot of trade-offs you want to keep in mind. Furthermore, the base length and width sliders also directly affect the handling of the tank because it is going to be affecting the width to length ratio for the tank. And of course, if the tank is too long, it is gonna have difficulty steering. Well, if it's gonna be too short compared to its width, it's gonna have a very unstable travel where it's gonna be automatically steering to the right or left without you wanting to. So that's something to keep in mind. You want to kind of balance out the length and width of the tank to get started. You might already notice we're already almost full of internal space. That is actually mostly going to be because of the um, suspension right here. So if we go to the mobility tab, go to tracks, and then to suspension right below here and to the right here, I can see some information about our suspension. If you want to maximize your space, you might actually want to consider taking one of the different suspensions, because these might actually give you more space than these ones right here. And of course, you can adjust your suspension quite a bit. These two right here, the left two, are both torsion bar suspensions. And those really can give you a lot of suspension power. But they also take up a lot of space. They're generally the best pick for the large tanks. And generally the best is to give them a short length and a large diameter, which is going to give them a very strong suspension. As you can see here, it doesn't slop down at all. Well, if I were to increase the length, it would already slop down more, and if I reduce the diameter, yeah, it's just gonna fall down. So if for the current version of the game, that is, the game is in active development, so it is all subject to change, of course. You want to maximize the diameter and minimize the torsion bar length to strengthen your suspension as much as possible, which is also going to give you quite a decent bit of internal space. The mobility tab is actually a very important tab when it comes to getting your most internal space, because your engine, I highly suggest going for the advanced tab, is also be directly affecting your internal space. You can increase or decrease the amount of cylinders and the size of the displacement of the engine. Note that displacement is per cylinder. So if it's a 3-liter V10, it's actually 30-liter engine. That is very big. Like in comparison, the Tiger 2 and Tiger 1 used a just under 2 liters V12s, which are probably still smaller than that V10 with 3 liters. So keep that in mind. On top of that, for the engines, you also have the maximum RPM here. If you go above this number or continuously hit this number, the engine is going to burn down and it's going to explode. So you want to watch out for that. So lower displacements are going to give you a higher max RPM. So while it does give you a lot more power to go here with your increased displacement, you might want to increase the number of cylinders first. Now we're going to go on over to transmissions. Transmissions, a lot of people cannot figure these out apparently. As a rule of thumb, you want to have more transmissions if you have the transmission powertrain If you have clutch braking, you don't need as many. And it is very much important to just use this number right here until this bottom number reaches around 1.5, between 1 and 1.5. So as I said, I put this to 8. You can only change this top value and then press this one basically to just align them. And then you can just finally adjust the sliders. But that is always a good start to kind of get that last gear at a decent gear ratio. Like, I can't drive this right now because I am missing my driver's viewport. But if I were to add it, it would actually already have quite a decent mobility. You can see here, I can easily go up to 25 kilometers an hour. If gear 6. Can probably even lower the gear ratio even slightly. But of course, that's a lot of fiddling around. And that's really up to what your personal preference is. Again, more gears will help you with steering. Getting a good final gear ratio is going to help you with getting a good final speed without over-revving. If you are over-revving your engine at the final gear drive, lower the gear ratio to make sure you have enough power drain from your engine to keep it at the lower RPMs. Also note that bigger gears do directly influence the amount of internal space that the transmission uses. So while having a high gear ratio definitely helps a ton with initial acceleration, going down on it will save a lot of internal space. So you kind of want to balance those out. The next on to fuel. By default, you have 800 liters. And if you look at this engine, we can drive about 300 kilometers with that amount of fuel. If you want to optimize your tank, probably go down to maybe 100 liters, 200 liters of fuel. Of course, it does depend on how realistic you want your tank to be. If you want to get a more realistic tank, fuel, of course, is going to be a thing that you want to keep at a higher capacity. But if you want to optimize your tank for actual combat, you can reduce it quite a bit. Fenders are purely visual, so they're not really too important. So now on the basics for firepower. You have gun mounts. When you're placing these, when you press left mouse button on something, you can get the ability to place it, but if you click on another one, it will not reselect it. So you have to press right mouse button to cancel your placement, and then you can click the different item to use that. So for guns, it is really more simple as it looks for a lot of things. So let's just take one of the ones that supports both azimuth and elevation. So you have different mantlets. Certain ones support horizontal travel, and some do not. Of course, if you're building a turreted tank, you do not need the horizontal, so you can keep it at 0, and it will not move horizontally. Well, this slider directly changes the size of the vertical drive in the turret. You can see it will take up a lot of vertical space in the turret here, but it will keep your elevation rate up. And you can see this one will have a maximum gun depression of 10 degrees. If you want to raise your gun depression, you're going to see this line right here. You must make sure this line can go up further. So, for example, if I am to increase the height of the turret, like so, and go back to my firepower tab, you can see, okay, this actually is the mantlet that's limited here. If we go here, we can see a minus 20.5 gun depression for a different gun. Yeah, so keep in mind certain mantlets have different properties, and you want to raise that turret if you want to get a very good gun depression. Another factor for gun depression is actually going to be the cannon itself. If you reduce the shell length, you can see that the length of the gun is going to be shorter in the back, so it can travel up further before hitting a block and going even as far as directly clipping into the hull. Similarly, increasing the diameter can actually shorten up the gun and make the effective length of the shell shorter, which is actually a really bit of a weird system right now, and that's probably going to be changed soon. But for guns, there's only a few things you have to keep in mind. The amount of penetration is solely defined by the caliber size, shell length, and required barrel length. As you can see here, this barrel only has a requirement of 1.97 meters. If I were to increase this to the absolute limit, you can see it requires 18 meters of length, and I can only hit 8 at max. Even if I do and try to put in a higher number, it doesn't work. So the actual maximum penetration that you can get lies with the gun that can just barely hit the required amount, or just over, and that says at currently 159 millimeters with 215 millimeter armor penetration. And yes, that is an absolutely huge gun. That said, of course, they also carry a lot of ammo. And ammo is a huge factor when it comes to weight. You can see here, go from 39 tons to over 55 by just putting in about 120-30 shells. And as such, if you want to, of course, optimize your build, you want to decrease the amount of ammunition. Do note that the gun by default only loads AP. You can see in the bottom left, I have a number 18 for the AP, and if I press 2, I will swap to the APHE. If you only carry APHE on your tank, it will not load the gun automatically. You have to swap to the different ammo manually. Keep that in mind, otherwise your tank will not fire. And also note that loading from ammo rack in the same compartment as the gun, so that means that if you have a hole mounted gun and you put the ammo in the hole, or you got a turret mounted gun and you put ammo in the turret, it's gonna reload faster. So that's a little bit of optimization. You can just carry a bunch of shells in the turret and that's it. And now we're gonna move over to the crew. So for the crew, they have very simple sliders for allocated space. You can see they will require more space, and then they'll be more efficient. Efficiency is actually mostly important on the commander and the loader, because the commander and loader both directly affect the reload rate of your gun. Because if you have the commander below 100%, the efficiency of the other crew members will go down. And you can see here it's minus 20% of what would otherwise be their number. So 60 goes down to 48, which is 1/5 of their efficiency. And 48 versus 100% is a significant difference if you check the cannon stats. I have a 22.35 seconds reload stat, but if I decrease these, the reload is going to be effectively much longer. You can see if I actually go in, I have almost a full minute of reload. And if I go back, put these back to max, they're gonna have the 20 seconds as the gun says in the stat card. So keep that in mind. There also is the radio man slot, but it has a ally control range, and efficiency doesn't affect it. So you can actually dunk that one entirely. The gunner is affected by cannon and turret move speed, so the vertical aiming and horizontal aiming will see a debuff if your gunner is not maxed out. And for the driver, changing the speed of changing gears will be affected depending by the amount of allocated space here. You can have crew do multiple things at once, but their efficiency is going to drop significantly if that happens. And as such, you can also just add a 5th crew member to do that radio man thing for them. And that's how you basically let the most efficiency out of your crew. Of course, we also have a lot of options of placing decorative items. And these items are actually limited by what item here you select. We have under the crew tab, you can go to cupolas, fibers, antennas, storages, crew hatches, lights, utilities, and anti-infantry stuff. But if you go to the firepower tab, you can actually change the muzzle brakes. And if you go to the mobility tab, and you go for the tracks, you can change, of course, the suspension, but you can also change what sprocket wheels you use. For example, you're in the rear, which idler wheel you want to use. In the front, road wheels. Of course, there's suspension, what return rollers you want to use, what kind of track you want, And you can also put on spare tracks onto your tank directly, which will always be the same type as the ones that you have on the track itself. So if you go change the track segments, you can see the spare tracks will also change. If you go to the engine tab, however, you get exhausts, such as the Tiger and Tiger 2 exhausts, and something like these T34 exhausts. You also get the ability to put in fans and or different kind of ventilation. And then if you go to the transmission, you don't get anything, but for fuel, you got external fuel tanks, which actually can allow you to carry fuel without actually using any internal space. You can see here 90 fuel capacity, so I will still have 90 liters of fuel, despite having no interior space used, which is actually another piece of optimization. You also have a fuel like refueling import like port here to refill your fuel. It's just visual, doesn't change anything. And then lastly, you have fenders where you can change the fenders. You also have these kind of fenders right here, which are like Tiger 2 style fenders. And you also get riveted panels, which you can put on the tank if you want to have one of those, like either French World War II style or stuff like that. If you just want to cover up the tracks like this, you can use those panels quite effectively. And one last thing to note about the placement stuff, if you want mirrored mode to be off, you can put this button right here to not have a mirror mode. Of course, items that have already been placed are not affected by that. You have to place a new item for that to happen. If you want to remove an item, you can simply click on it and right mouse button to clean up your tank. And that's pretty much it for just all of the building stuff. One last thing to note with the paints, you can put on paint, you can put on decals, so this shall be quite a simple way of doing things, really. And yeah, that's pretty much it for basic information on how to do stuff with your tanks. How to actually make a most efficient hull shape will actually be covered in another video. So do subscribe if you guys want to see that. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something. I'll catch you guys all next time.